This week on the Destination Angler.
Can you be intimate enough to make it feel like the person watching is there, right? Are they being drawn in? You'll see tons of footage, millions of shots of someone, a splash and the angler setting the hook there, which is a great moment. But did you really see what was going on? What was going through the fish's mind, in a sense, as it was coming up to the fly.
Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haig. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Hey anglers, welcome back to another episode of the Destination Angler, brought to you by J.P. Ross Fly Rods, makers of happiness, one rod at a time. Get outside and simply fish. And by Catch Flow, fly fishing's only artist-crafted fly fishing themed footwear brand. Express your passion off the water and shop today at catchflow.com. That's CATCHFLO.com. You can join in the conversation with the Destination Angler on social media. And hey, if you like the show, please give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up on the Destination Angler, we're headed to northern Wisconsin for some incredible smallmouth bass fishing on the Menominee River with Tim Landwehr of Tight Lines Fly Fishing. And be sure to backcast to catch the last episode in Newfoundland with diehard Atlantic salmon guide David Hartland. With over 60% of the world's top Atlantic salmon streams, Newfoundland is the place to go if you're looking for some head-shaking, hard-running, tail-walking trophies. You won't want to miss these shows, and be sure to hit that subscribe button so you catch all the Destination Angler podcasts coming your way. Today, our destination is Dutch John, Utah, and the incredible Alpine lakes and streams that blanket the high country. And our guest is expert fly angler, guide, and videographer Ryan Kelly, known on social media as the Green River Fly Fisher. For most of us, when we think of Dutch John, we think of the Flaming Gorge Reservoir and the Green River, and for good reason. Yet few anglers know about the hundreds of alpine lakes and streams in the area that hardly see a fly. If you're willing to do a little hiking, you can fish in solitude for big, fat, healthy rainbows, cuts, grayling, even tiger trout, some topping 20 inches. A little bit about Ryan. He's been fishing the Flaming Gorge area for over 40 years and has worked in the fly fishing industry for 28. In an average year, he spends over 200 days on the water and has guided over 3,500 days in total on the green alone. As a videographer, Ryan is highly sought after with clients such as Sims, FlyLords Magazine, and many of the local businesses. Man, let me tell you, I was blown away with the quality and creativity of his work. In fact, his movie Escape, which is part of the 2021 Fly Fishing Film Tour, has some of the most unique trout footage I've ever seen. And lucky for us, Ryan is here to give us the lowdown on fishing at altitude in this part of the world and share tips on creating what he calls those moments of addictions with a camera. So grab your hiking boots and a camera and let's head up into the high country of northern Utah with Ryan Kelly. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So Ryan, you've been out working on some mountain bike trails today, is that right? Or this week?
Yeah. The last few days I fished quite a bit early in the week, and then the last few days have been out building some trail and trying to create a trails complex of sorts right here in my community. Hopefully to create more opportunity for everybody, but particularly young people to get out and ride and hike. I just feel like it makes the community a better place, with those opportunities that are really convenient.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you live in Dutch John, is that right?
I do. I live in Dutch John, Utah. Yeah, it's just a tiny little town, about 150 people, about 80 homes, a couple hundred boats, and a whole lot of fish.
So more boats than homes.
Yeah, that's about how it rolls. You got to have at least one boat per person in your household, I think, is kind of the rule around here.
Oh, that's awesome.
The one thing almost everyone notices if they ever drive through our town, they always make that comment, man, there are so many boats here.
And you talking drift boats, you talking power boats, because you've got the gigantic reservoir right there, correct?
Yeah, we sure do. It's a little bit of all of it. You got to have one for the lake. You got to have one for, fly fishing on the river. You got to have a kayak kicking around, maybe a raft playing the whitewater. There's a little bit of everything, or something you can transport to the high country, maybe just a kick boat. So yeah, you see all sorts of craft around here.
Okay. What's a kick boat?
Kickboat's like maybe that's a local term for just like a small pontoon boat, like a one-man pontoon, where you use your feet to
Yeah.
to kind of steer and kick the boat and keeps your hands free so you can, fish and fly fish. They're fairly common to see on the river here.
Interesting. So you'll take one of those kick boats up to a high mountain stream, is that right? Or I mean, a river or a lake?
Yeah, I was going to say not a stream, but yeah, I don't so much, but it is common to see. Yeah, a lot of guys do. Back in the day, I did quite a bit. Anymore now, I'm more into the hiking, quite a bit farther distance. So packing one of those in is a little bit of a challenge, but I'd rather hike to some of the smaller lakes at this point.
I see. And just hit them from the shoreline then.
Yeah, usually, yep, just hiking around the lake, kind of hunting for fish, hunting for shallower fish typically.
Well, I tell you, when I called you a couple of weeks ago, so I've been following you on Instagram for a long time and just really love your videos. They're just really incredible. And when I called you, I thought, well, maybe Ryan will do a show on the Green River. And you had some other ideas. You wanted to talk about the Alpine lakes and streams, and I'm curious, like, why are you so excited about the Alpine lakes and streams when you've got the Green River right in your backyard?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been fortunate to spend my whole life fishing the Green here, and it's become pretty popular. I'm sure I could blame myself for part of that, I guess, for that Instagram. It's probably helped a teeny tiny bit, though. I have magazine articles from the 80s stashed away here at the house. So it's been getting a lot of attention for a long time. Of course, I think you mentioned, like in an intro or something like that there's like 10,000 fish per mile, it's an amazing place that way. So, but I think the real answer is just solitude. We just live in a time where there's a lot of people, and social media and other things like that have brought a lot of people to specific areas and places. And it's just a great place to get away. If you're willing to walk a few miles, you can pretty much have a place to yourself. And there's just a lot of places to go here. So it's fun to explore. And sometimes they're amazing and sometimes they're kind of duds and you don't find much. But I've found some absolutely incredible fishing and fish in the high country as well. And just, so yeah, I think we're just I agree to do this because give people an opportunity that if they're coming here, there's more than just one option in the area.
Right. And so can you kind of describe the scenery out there for people that aren't familiar with Flaming Gorge and Dutch John, Utah? Like what is the scenery like out there? It's super mountainous, obviously.
So it's a really interesting place. Dutch John sits right where the high desert plains of Wyoming enters Utah, and then it butts up against the Uinta mountain range. So you can go in just a few minutes, you change dramatically the type of scenery you're in, but also the type of climate that you're in. So on the Green River, you have, the red rock that Utah's famous for, that we have more trees than in the southern part, but we're at the very northern tip of the Colorado Plateau. So when you're floating the river, you're floating throughout a 1,000-foot deep canyon with big red rock walls on both sides, with crystal clear water and amazing colors. A lot of people don't believe they're real colors at times. Think some of the pictures that I take are just photoshopped. So that's a really interesting thing. But if I just drive 10 miles to the south, I'll climb 2,000 feet in elevation, and we'll be in heavy alpine, pine trees, aspen trees, quaky aspens.
Yeah.
And it very quickly becomes small streams and very small lakes. And then within an hour in my house, I can drive above the tree line. So up above, it's about 10,000 feet is the tree line. I can be above that tree line and start hiking. And at the base of the tree line of the mountains is just dotted with hundreds of small lakes.
Oh, wow.
Right on that tree line. So it's really kind of a great place that I love to go in the late summer and fall. And you can just find a variety of fish up there. You can go, kind of a fun little story. I guess it was about 95 degrees on the river here one summer day. And I said to my kids, you want to go have a snowball fight? We drove up to 10,500 feet, went for a little hike, found a big snowfield and had a snowball fight.
That's great.
And then caught a few, and then let my kids caught a few tiger trout on a stream that was running through the meadow with the snow in that area.
Nice. So your kids are into fishing, huh?
Yeah, they are. My youngest really is into it. I have two kids, a girl and a boy. My oldest girl is very outdoorsy, but not as much into fishing specifically, though she does fishing. And I have a 10-year-old boy who we get out every week together. He really enjoys it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just before we dive more into these alpine lakes, can you talk about the reservoir? Because there's some fantastic fishing in that reservoir, isn't there?
There is absolutely, and there's some amazing things there that fly anglers generally aren't aware of. But just to give some details on Flaming Gorge, it's 91 miles lengthwise, is 365 miles of shoreline, and so it's very large. It's considered the best lake trout fishery in the lower 48, with fish pushing up to 60 pounds.
Really?
Would be a really big one. You'll get them to 50, 55. I don't know that anyone's broken 60 that I'm aware of, but high 50s have happened in recent years. It's much more common to get 30, 40 pounders in there. Some fly anglers will try and get them. There's a few select times, particularly in the winter, when you can get those big lake trout on a fly. But it's very challenging. Anyone who does it will tell you, it's kind of like the fish of 10,000 casts type of situation for those really big giant ones. But there's times like coming up here in November, you can go get lots of what we call the pups, or the small ones, which tend to be anything under about 8 pounds. So you can go get like a lot of 3 to 5 pounders on a fly, which, is pretty fun on a 5 or a 6 weight.
Oh, cool.
So if you have boat access, you can get out and catch it literally a boatload. They're pretty overpopulated, those youngsters, so we do encourage people to keep them. The limit is 12 per person per day, which kind of gives you an idea of how many there are. So you can have a high number day of 3 to 5 pounders. For lake trout, it's a really strong rainbow trout fishery as well. It sees very little pressure for that. So you can have fantastic rainbow trout days. I posted something on my Instagram story a few days ago, an old article from 2011 that the author had said I'd caught 70 rainbows in like 3 hours or something like that. I think that was a bit of a stretch, but mathematically, when you're catching 15 to 20 inch rainbows, it's hard to get them at that rate. But that kind of just the point of that is that the fishing is fast at times for those rainbows out there. It's a really strong smallmouth bass fishery. You can get very large, trophy size smallies, kind of the central north end, though the volume is low. Population is fairly low for smallies on that end. And then the south end of the lake, down where I live, they're kind of the opposite. They're almost overpopulated, where you can, go out, and it's great for kids because you can get about as many as you can catch. You can imagine in a short amount of time, but they're going to be more like in that 5 to 12 inch lengthwise, so fairly small, with the occasional 15, maybe up to 18, 19 inches in a more of a rare situation. But yeah, if you're a serious bass angler up on the north end, then getting a 5 or maybe even 6 pounder is definitely a possibility up there. And then it's an amazing kokanee salmon fishery. We have people come from all over the world for kokanee salmon.
Oh, that's great.
Especially here in the West. They're large for kokanee. If you're familiar with kokanee, most of them kind of tend to be in that 14, 15 inch range. Our kokanee consistently top 20 inches is not uncommon. We run a couple different fishing tournaments, and the winning kokanee in the springtime is usually like a 23 inch kokanee, so like a 5 or 6 pounder.
Wow.
Type fish. So, it's an amazingly diverse fishery. It has giant carp in it. It makes you kind of feel like flats fishing. You can get out and do that, wade the flats in a few areas, search for 10 to 30 pound carp. That's really popular amongst local fishing guides. Like to get out and do that on days off.
Do something different.
I'm trying to think what else I've left out. We have burbot, or what's also known as ling, right? It's a freshwater ling cod. We run a huge ice fishing tournament for that. in January of each year, the last weekend of January. Last year, I had 1,350 competitors in that. So it's super popular. A lot of the big companies sponsor that. We have some big name brands, like Stryker in there. Colton Christensen's bait company known as Ned's Bait Box, specifically for burbot, is a local company here that sells across. He also does kokanee custom lures as well. But a lot of the big brands get on board for that. Sportsman's Warehouse is always great sponsoring that as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I feel bad not naming everybody, but man, there's so many sponsors for that. But yeah, so it's an amazingly diverse lake where you can do all sorts of different kinds of fishing. It's at the steepest point, it's about 450 feet deep. So it's a very deep lake as much as it is long, and creates that diversity. And there's a few other fish like chubs and catfish and stuff that kick around in there as well. And I didn't mention there are brown trout and cutthroat trout in there as well. They're in lower numbers, but there's some pretty nice cutties that come out of there. A friend of mine got like an 8-pound cutty out of there a couple of years ago. But I would say most of the cutthroat are somewhere more like in that 18-20 inch range that I commonly see. But I don't see those in high numbers at all. It's more like, I'd catch 10 rainbows to every one cutthroat.
Yeah. Man, it sounds like a fantastic place to go. Maybe if you're out there fishing the Alpine lakes and a couple days on the green, maybe do a couple days on the reservoir as well. Sounds like you'd have some really good fishing.
Yeah, there's so much diversity here.
Hi, everybody. This is JP from JP Ross Fly Rods. We're happy to support Steve and sponsor the Destination Angler podcast. Do us a favor and check us out on our website, smallstreamflyfishing.com. JP Ross Fly Rods and Company has been around since 1997. We've made thousands of fly rods with one purpose, helping you get outside and be happy. So check out our line of small stream fly rods like our Muir 7-foot 5-piece 3-weight E-glass, our famous Beaver Meadow series of rods starting at 5-foot 2-weight, and don't forget our 6.5-foot 3-weight 4-piece, and now our new Beaver Meadow S-glass 6.5, 2-weight, 3-weight, all the way up to 8-foot 5-weight, all in 4-piece. Check us out, please, at smallstreamflyfishing.com. And thanks a lot for listening. We'll see you on the water.
So, Ryan, all right, so let's get into the Alpine lakes and streams. So give us kind of an overview. What's available out there?
Well, kind of like I was saying on the lake, there's a lot of diversity, but Alpine streams and lakes are very diverse as well. Trying to think of where to start. There's a lot of really small streams here. Kind of gives you a really high alpine feel where you're getting 6 to 12 inch fish. But there's brook trout, there's rainbow trout, there's cutthroat trout, tiger trout are common in those streams as well. And just depending on the drainage you're in, you'll get into different fish. So we have some drainages that are the native cutthroat, North Slope Uinta cutthroat strain, which would fall under the Colorado River cutthroat umbrella, would be a substrain of that. And usually they have tiger trout mixed in with those because tiger trout, don't reproduce. They're a fish that doesn't naturally reproduce.
Okay.
And then you'll have drainages that will have more brook trout and rainbow trout in them. And then we have Arctic grayling that are thrown in.
Nice.
You could throw in that mix. I usually don't see those in the streams very often, though it can happen. They're usually in a lot of the smaller lakes, alpine lakes up there. So that's the main fish that are in the high elevation lakes. And you can kind of just choose, hey, what do I want to target? What species do I want to target today, or maybe you want to get them all in one day. I've entertained my kids that way before. Let's see if we can, how many different species we can get today.
Can you hike up there and hike from one lake to the next and get different species all in a day?
Yeah, you sure can. There is a very extensive trail systems out here where you can get to those lakes. So if you're hiking on a lot of the well-maintained trail systems, you might hit 5 or 10 lakes. You'd have the possibility just on that trail system.
You mean like in a day?
I don't know if I'd do them all in a day because you wouldn't be able to fish at any one lake,
Yeah.
for very long. But yeah, you might be like, hey, I'm going to go hit this lake for a couple hours, and then I'm going to swing up to the next lake for a couple hours, and then maybe I'll go hit another lake for a couple hours. So you might hit 3 or 4 if you wanted to. For sure, I can think of several areas like that where you could just jump from lake to lake. There's a popular area called Spirit Lake. There's actually a small lodge there that has some pretty primitive cabins. It's kind of a bring your own sleeping bag, just give you a shelter as much as anything. But that's a great base camp, and off that trail system right there, you can hit easily in one day. You could hit 3 or 4 lakes right there, or lengthen it out, and do overnight, which is super common there. There's some really great camping areas along some of the lakes in that area that people have built. And yeah, you could a lot of guys plan on spending like a week, I would say, or, at least 3 or 4 days, and just kind of bounce from lake to lake or stream to stream.
I gotcha. And what are elevations for us flatlanders coming out that way? What should we expect?
Yeah, there's a lot of diversity in elevation. It goes up really fast. So anywhere from like 7,000 feet to almost 11,000 feet. I would say most of the lakes kind of top out just slightly below 11. So a lot of those areas where I'm hiking a lot longer distance, I would say are between 9 and 10.
Okay.
So, you're up there, so even in the summer, it's, you're going to want to have a jacket. It's definitely, will be cool. And if you're in the middle of the summer, you're going to have some, mosquitoes and things like that. I generally wait till like middle of August, and you'll have the first frost up there, and that kills off all the biting bugs. And then you don't have to worry about them anymore.
Okay. When is your ice off typically?
Up in those, a lot of times not until like mid-June. So there's not a tremendously large window for, in terms of months up in the high country of available access.
Yeah.
In the real high stuff like that. There are a lot of lakes between like 6,000 and 8,000 that you can start fishing like in May, even late April, and they'll go all the way into almost to Thanksgiving before they really freeze.
Okay.
And those lakes typically hold the bigger fish, and the highest mountain lakes usually have a little smaller fish. Though it's not consistent all the way through. There are some of those really high mountain lakes where we've gone tiger trout well in excess of 20 inches, up to 2 feet.
Oh, nice. And a tiger trout where do tiger trout come from?
It's a cross between a brown trout and a brook trout.
Okay. Brown and a brook.
So it can happen in nature naturally, though it's not real common, if you get browns and brook trout spawning in the same area. But usually they're used more as a management tool, at least here in Utah, and I know Colorado does the same. So they'll mix them in with cutthroats, and it helps. Tigers tend to be really aggressive. So if you have like fish and they do manage to figure out a way to get there, like you'll get some brook trout or grayling or something that get into some of the lakes they're trying to protect. Those tiger trout have a tendency to eat the smaller, offspring of those fish. And so they use it to try to help keep unwanted fish numbers down in those areas.
Oh, interesting.
And they'll, they don't live super, well, I shouldn't say that. I don't know how long they live for sure, but it seems like they don't last super long in those high lakes. So they can kind of control by stocking how many they have in there to use as the management tool.
Okay. Interesting. How good of a fight does a tiger put up?
It's pretty good, I would say, most of the time. I mean, if you think of a mix of both a brook trout and a brown.
Yeah, it should be.
It's a pretty good fight. And they definitely, where they don't reproduce, they grow really fast. They're not burning off a lot of energy during reproduction time. And they tend to be eager eaters, like brook trout tend to be. More on that side, it seems like, than the selective nature of brown trout.
Interesting. And so are most of these fish that you're running into, for instance, the grayling, are those natural, or did somebody stock those years ago? What's wild? What's stocked? Give us a flavor of that.
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of mix. Though a lot of that high mountain stuff, it would be stocked. For sure. The high Alpine, I don't know if you've ever seen like the viral videos of stalking by airplane.
Yeah, I've seen those, yeah.
That are out there. My friend Phil Peddle put one out a couple of years ago that ended up going on newscasts all over the country, and people were talking about. And the reality is a lot of those lakes they don't hold fish. And a lot of them, there's no inlet or outlet or anything like that. And so they've found that they can do some stocking, and the fish will survive through a normal life cycle.
Yeah, it's deep enough.
In that, so a lot of those lakes, are 100% stocked type lakes, but they do provide fishing opportunities for hikers. They provide food, along the trail. Anglers are definitely encouraged to keep fish in those areas. For sure. And so, it's a great way to feed yourself while you're out there.
Yeah.
Especially if you're out on, like a week-long or 2-week-long hiking trip. So it's really cool. And they tend to, they do a lot of research into it. There's some lakes they found that aren't suitable for trout, but were suitable for grayling, for example. And we have some really good grayling lakes that only have grayling in them because the trout just couldn't survive in them.
That'd be fun. Yeah, and you were telling me before the show, you've had some really good grayling days, haven't you?
Yeah, some just fantastic in terms of high number, but pretty decent grayling. There's a couple places where we've gotten them up. I've gotten them up to almost, I don't know, not quite 17 inches, maybe just a little bit over 16. Which for a grayling is a decent fish, especially if you're not in Alaska.
For sure. And what kind of wildlife can you expect to see up there?
I generally run into moose, would probably be the most common. Elk is common. Deer is common. I probably see more deer than moose. Actually, now that I think about it, we see so many deer here that you don't pay attention to them as much. So yeah, in the high country, all three of those are pretty common. You could come across, a black bear. I would say that's really occasional. But if you left food out, if you're on a hiking trip or something or camping and you leave food out, then your chances would go up, quite a bit. You still would want to take, precautions of putting food away, and not just for bears, for any of in the wildlife.
Okay.
You don't want to encourage any of the wildlife to come hang out in your camp.
You think? Have you had some close encounters?
I've had many, especially with moose. I've been, in thick brush in little streams, and you kind of break your way through the brush and pop out. And I've had a couple instances where I popped out in the stream and there was a moose standing in the stream, 10,
shoot.
20, 30 feet from me. And I just kind of jumped right back in the bushes. I've had a few of those. Another time I was just jogging on the trail, came around the corner and had a moose staring me right in the face. She was running right at me. Fortunately, we both ran, in opposite directions, but sure made my heart drop.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So the moose took off too, huh?
Yeah. Fortunately she did. Yeah. A couple of years ago, there's, during the rut, male and female were getting frisky right in the middle of the trail. So I just kind of sat back quite a ways and waited them out.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, I probably sat there, I would guess, like 45 minutes to an hour.
Oh, man.
Kind of waited the deal out, and then they went on their way, and then I went on my way. So I really didn't want to, bring any attention to myself. But it was, it was kind of cool to watch, too.
I was going to say, a lot better than sitting around watching a football game, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Hey, anglers, I'm proud to introduce our newest sponsor, Catchflow, fly fishing's one and only artist-crafted fly fishing themed footwear brand. With new product drops each month, Catchflow's large and growing selection of fun, casual fly fishing themed shoes, flip-flops, and socks are all about helping you express your passion off the water. I own a pair of Catchflow shoes myself, and man, let me tell you, they're pretty cool. And with the holiday shopping season near, Catchflows are the perfect unique gift for the passionate fly angler in your life. Explore and buy at catchflow.com, and when you do, be sure to use coupon code DAPOD10 at checkout for 10% off your first order. One of the cool things about Catchflow is they donate 2% of your purchase to support Project Healing Waters and Casting for Recovery. So stop by catchflow.com today and pick up a pair. That's catchflo.com. So Ryan, tell us, you make these incredible memories with your camera, and I'm wondering if there's, a story or about a fish or two that you could tell us that were particularly memorable for you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the memorable ones is was fishing on one of these high mountain lakes, and the aspens were just really lit up in the fall, and they just a real reddish orange, which usually people think of aspens as being yellow, but our aspens here will go yellow, red, and orange. And I was like, I know like the tiger trout in the fall turn a reddish orange, kind of if you think of that brown trout pumpkin mixed with that red of a brook trout. And I was like, I want to catch a really nice fish that matches the colors of the aspen. And so I spent several days actually on that particular lake catching a lot of nice tigers. And then finally I got one, a really nice tiger. It's actually in, I don't know if we've mentioned the film Escape, but you probably will later. It's actually in there. That tiger trout's in there. And then it cuts into another shot of these really lit up aspens.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And so, I wanted to match that cut, the color of the tiger trout to match the color of the aspens of that next shot. So that was memorable, catching a fish, not just for the sake of catching a fish, but, for something that was in my mind as far as a story and colors and, wasn't just any fish. And it took quite a while.
You did it.
To get that one. Yeah, it sure did. And the day we got that, it was really cold.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, I think, it was right before, it was one of the last days of the season, right before ice on. And it was, temperatures in the 20s. And
oh, wow.
My friend that came with me that day that ended up holding the fish for the shot, I give him all the kudos in the world for holding that fish with freezing hands.
Exactly.
So, but you can see in this shot, it's like just barely above the water. We just barely lifted it a tiny bit, and then you got it right back on its way. When it's that cold, you don't want to be holding those guys out of the water much. So
not a lot.
We grabbed it quick.
Yeah. Speaking of your movie, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your movie, because you shared the link with me, and it's really super well done. Some super unique footage, but I'm kind of curious how it came about. And I think there's a particular story there about, your life and why you made it. Could you share that with us?
Yeah. I can share that with you. It's definitely a little bit personal, and I don't know, I definitely acquiesced into the project.
Did you? Okay.
For sure. Yeah. Kind of the backstory on it, or my whole Instagram for that matter, is, so I used to guide a lot. As you mentioned, thousands of days on the Green River here, and I used to guide a couple hundred days a year, or close to it, give or take, on either side of 200 there. But I don't know, about quite a few years ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago, my legs started feeling weird to me, and I just thought I was starting to get older. But long story short, there, about how long has it been? About 3 years ago, I guess now, things started getting a lot worse. And it turns out I had a neurological disorder, which it kind of wraps into like an autoimmune type thing, I guess. The doctors were kind of unsure at the time when we started making that film exactly what it was. And they kind of just referred to it as an autoimmune. So we've narrowed it down. It's more, I guess, of a disorder. Mm-hmm. But either way, whatever we want to call it or classify it, it just requires me to move is really the only treatment. So I, tend to work out, I guess you could say. That's probably not the best word. I mostly hike or bike or rowboat, like 3 times a day. And so I was just outside, in various places. And that's kind of where I got into the Alpine lakes a lot more, was giving me some variety of hiking areas. And yeah, it was kind of interesting. I would come home and be like, oh, I saw the coolest thing today, right? I saw this otter grab a fish, or I saw this moose, like the story I just told. I saw this moose getting frisky with this lady or whatever. And I was eating dinner, and my uncle Jess was there. He was like, man, you should start carrying a camera. And I was like, oh, all right, that'd be cool. And then the next week he had purchased a camera, a used DSLR camera, and just gave it to me. And he's like, hey, take this with you. See what you can find. And so, I started just taking some pictures stuff that I saw that I was walking around while I was walking around. So I started doing that. And then as my health got worse, I thought, well, maybe I couldn't keep guiding. I couldn't keep guiding at the rate I was guiding. Physically, my body just it wasn't holding up. And I found that I could only guide really a couple days a week was about as much as I could handle, which is, a pretty big drop off.
Yeah. Ryan, because you're sitting still in a boat. Is that why?
Yes, it was the sitting in the boat. Even though I was exercising somewhat with the rowing, my legs just weren't doing a lot in the boat. But also, it would kind of wear me out in terms of it's kind of a slow workout where my body, what we found is I need to have like bursts that get my heart rate up, things like that. Little more short but intense works best. And that kind of evolved over time, trying to figure that out. So that's kind of how that Instagram and everything got started. I thought, you know what, I'll just start throwing a few pictures on Instagram. That was like a foreign thing to me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'd never had an Instagram before, never even looked at it before, but I'd been told that was a really cool place to share pictures. And so I started sharing the pictures, and then I took a job with a local outfitter here at Trout Creek Flies, managing Trout Creek, the outfitter as a whole. And it's a fairly large operation, not super big, but they have an RV park. They also have cabins for rent. They have rafts for rent, and they have a guide service and a fly shop and a C-store. So it was a little bit of a larger type operation. And I started working there, and honestly, I hated every second of being inside doing that. I was like, I can't do this. So after about 9 months, me and the owner talked it over, and we ended up parting ways there. And I thought, man, I'll just go back to school. And I started doing all these pictures, and I said to my wife, I think I want to go back for digital art. And one of my employees at the time there at Trout Creek said, hey, I just took those classes in school. He had come to work with us for the summer. And he's like, we YouTubed every assignment. And so I was like, huh. So I knew I had a few months before I made any decisions. So for the next 3 months, every day I would just do a new digital art assignment of sorts. And then I would do it, and then I would send it over to like the local chamber of commerce or a local business and be like, hey, if you can use this, I'm just practicing. Kind of do with it what you will. And at the end of that 3 months, the Chamber of Commerce came and said, hey, do you want to work for us? And I was like, oh, really? Like, what do you mean? And they're like, hey, like helping promote, do posters for events, doing social media like Instagram and Facebook, all that kind of stuff, just digital media type stuff. So they're like, if you guide 2 days a week and work for us 3 days a week, we can afford you, and we think it would work out for your family. So
yeah, good fit.
We kind of looked at the financials on that, and we're like, I think we could make this work. And so we started to do it. And then as we started getting into it a little bit social media wise, I was like, this is all going to video. Like, these pictures are nice, but that's not where it was trending towards video. And that was a few years ago. And obviously it has trended towards video, as Instagram came out recently and said, we're a video platform and not a picture platform anymore. So I just woke up one day and said to my wife, I'm going to make videos. And I knew nothing about the video side.
Really?
But I had a mutual friend named Gilbert Rowley, and Gilbert has had films in the International Fly Fishing Film Festival, the IF4, for 7 or 8 years. He had won, I think, was Drake Magazine's Freshwater Film of the Year a few years ago, and at that time would have been like really recent to when we talked. And so I called Gilbert, and just didn't really know him at the time, but this mutual friend had given me his number and just kind of told him what was going on, and he was more than happy to help and mentor me and kind of help me set up stuff.
Nice.
And so I met with Gilbert. He doesn't live super close to me, but we met kind of at a central location, and he helped me get started with that. And then honestly, like from an editing standpoint, I just started same thing I did with digital art. I would just YouTube an editing assignment every night after I got the kids in bed. And, after a year or so, I got to be, I guess, decent at it, or
Sure.
proficient. At least people seem to like it. So that's kind of the backstory of all that. And so we got into, that's how that Instagram got going. And then how the escape came about is the F3T, Paul Nicoletti at F3T actually called me and asked me if I'd ever been interested in making a film. And I said, I was like, well, I kind of made one once. It's not very good. But no, I'm not really interested in doing something else. And so that was that. But then Paul was pretty persistent, called me again probably like 2 months later, and said, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, I'm sure. And then he called me again like a month later.
Persistent.
And he's like, are you really sure? He's like, your stuff is super cool. Right?
Yeah.
Your edits are really cool. And I was like, all right, give me a week. I'll whip something up, send it over, and, you can tell me what you think.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I sent that over, and Paul was kind of like, well, he's like, this footage is unbelievable, but the story is not very good. And I was like, yeah, I'm not very good at telling that, or that aspect of it, because really I'm just collecting footage while I'm out hiking. And he's like, wait, what? He's like, how did you get all this footage? And then so I explained the story about me getting, sick. And he's like, that's the story we want to hear.
Okay.
He's like, that's a really interesting story. And I was like, you want me to tell a story about myself and him and some of the other people, where they were like, yeah.
You were reluctant.
So that was pretty awkward. So I started to try to do that. It didn't go very well. And so Paul reached back out with me on the project and said, hey, do you mind if we have someone come over and interview you? We'll ask the questions, you just give us the answers. And then we'll have one of our editors see if they can kind of splice it in and help the story along. And so that's kind of how that worked. And I think Keiko, I think I'm saying her name right, remember right? She did a really good job with that. And then she just kind of let me do all the editing of the non-talking parts for the most part. She did shorten a few things up here and there, but she's like, yeah, your editing's super cool, and we want to keep that aspect into it. So yeah, that's kind of how that came about. And I don't know, it's kind of weird.
Okay.
Not really how I planned it, but actually, like, the Chamber of Commerce in the state of Utah got on board with the project, and then they ended up sponsoring it and making it worth my time monetarily to actually do the film.
Thanks for sharing that story. You really covered it there. First of all, I just wanted to tell you, I'm sorry about your situation and the disease you're dealing with. And but I tell you, you're making some absolutely stunning photography, videography, and I guess maybe there's a silver lining out of getting sick. I mean, would you say?
I try to see it that way, for sure.
Yeah.
I was always taught to make the best of a situation. I talk about with my kids turning frustration into fight. We're all going to have adversity or frustrations, and I talk about that in the film. Do you want to make something positive out of your frustration and that energy that comes out of it, or do you want something negative to come out of it?
Yeah, great points.
It's got to go somewhere.
Well, we're pulling for you. I hope you start feeling better. I hope there's some answers for you here. Could you share with us, most of us are amateurs with camera and iPhones and whatever the heck we're using out there, but could you give us some thoughts on, for instance, composition? Like, what do you think about when you're headed to the stream?
Oh, from a filming standpoint?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of thought that goes into all of it. That thought process, I think, helps keep me interested. I know it seems like a glamour life at times to be out there all the time, but sometimes it just feels like a chore, to have to go out all the time. So it keeps it interesting. Things that I think about, a lot of creativity. How can I get a shot that nobody's really shot before? What are the angles that you don't typically see as you scroll through social media or even in film? So composition-wise, and then what are the moments that draw people in? What are the memories or the moments that people love or sometimes I refer to it like the moment of addiction. And I think the simple answer for that, for most fly anglers, or at least dry fly anglers, is when the fish rises, right? Comes up to the
Sure.
fly, whether it's your fly or you're just watching them sip a natural off the surface. So that's kind of one of the main things. And then one, can you be intimate enough to make it feel like the person watching is there, right? Are they being drawn in? It's not just, you'll see tons of footage, millions of shots of someone, a splash in the angler setting the hook there, which is a great moment.
Sure.
But did you really see what was going on? What was going through the fish's mind, in a sense, as it was coming up to the fly. I've been fortunate to watch thousands of slow motion refusals, and it's definitely affected how I tie flies, or really what the fish are keying on in big hatches, for example. So those are really cool things that have come out of it. So composition-wise, those are some of the first thoughts that I have. And then I try to get different angles. So I'll use a drone quite a bit, get wide angles, top-down angles, underwater footage, which you see less of. You see more of it now with waterproof phones, but so different underwater footage, the way bugs move, the way bubbles move, can be really cool in there. I guess, and I don't know if I'm answering the question very well, but creativity is probably the number one thing. People get bored, even if it's an amazing shot. If it's the same kind of shot over and over again, people eventually get bored with it.
Yeah, your stuff is super, super creative, Ryan. And as you're talking about this, I'm thinking there's got to be hours and hours that go into every 1 minute video, for instance, that you're publishing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it sounds like you've followed my Instagram quite a bit. So, there's a lot of really close-up tight shots of fish eating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
those are incredibly difficult. If they're just eating naturals, it's a little bit easier. But for example, I'll dress in camo, and a lot of times I'll just go sit down next to a fish, try not to spook it, and then it usually takes the fish a while to get comfortable with me being there.
Huh.
But if I can get the fish comfortable and it just starts doing its natural feeding with me pretty close, then I've got a chance, of getting something really good. And then the other thing that a lot of people wouldn't think of, but the reflection off the lens is a real deterrent. When you swing that lens up, you get a lot of sun reflection.
Sure.
Or it could look like a big predator eye. That'll spook fish quite a bit. So being careful with not moving the camera very fast tends to be really important. You're not swinging up really fast.
Right.
And then another thing is I use my core muscles a lot like a gimbal. 'Cause you can't really use a gimbal when you're shooting shots like that. But so you have good stabilization with the camera.
What's a gimbal, Ryan?
A gimbal is a tool that's used in cameras that will create, or what's the best way to describe a gimbal? It takes out the camera shake that you would naturally have in your hands and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah, so usually it's a combination of software weighting. There's lots of different gimbals that make it so that the footage is really smooth is what is the purpose of a gimbal. But yeah, I found that if I put the strap around my neck and then keep the camera really tight and then just use my core muscles to turn instead of like hands, shoulders, stuff like that, then it will keep it really pretty good. And then if you shoot in slow motion, it'll smooth out the footage quite a bit. Won't make it near as shaky.
Oh, interesting.
So those are some tips. Those are some really
Great
good tips if you're shooting wildlife in general. Like if you're shooting a really long shot and you're not on a tripod, using your neck, good solid stance and your core muscles to do that. And if you don't have core muscles and you're a serious photographer like that, you may want to get some, go do some workouts, strengthen them up. Yeah.
Go get some.
Yeah. I've had quite a few videographers ask me about that. And I'm like, yeah.
Core muscles.
They're like, I don't have abs. Like,
sit-ups, man.
You may want to get some if you want to do a lot of those stuff.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen my solar plexus since like 1987, so I think I'd have to do a whole lot of sit-ups to get that core muscle stuff going. But and you were telling me before the show about maybe some tips on handling fish when you're doing video, because like any trout, you're trying to get them back in the water as soon as possible.
Yeah, so shooting slow motion is a really great way to do that. Most cameras today, like a phone, most iPhones now, will shoot 240 frames per second. So to put that in perspective, when you watch like TV, it's 24 frames per second. And so you're shooting at 1/10 the speed. So if I shoot a fish for 1 second, that will give me 10 seconds of usable footage, right? So what we usually do is we'll keep the fish in the water, get the camera and keep it in the net, and then keep the net up just enough that the fish is in the water, but then you can get focus on the net. So you have really sharp focus.
Okay.
And then lift the fish right up on the edge of that net so it stays right in focus. And because you're shooting in super slow-mo, you want to lift the fish really fast. Because if you lift it slow in slow-mo, then it's really, really slow, if that makes sense.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so you lift really fast, and that will also create more water movement. And water in slow-mo looks really cool. So you lift really, really fast, so it lasts about 1 second. Maybe the fish is out for 2 seconds, and then you just put him right back in the water. And a lot of times we might do 3 or 4 of those. So lift him up, lift him down, make sure we're getting the shot, but give him time to recover for a few seconds. Lift up, and then on the one where we're going to do the release, then you just tell the person handling the fish, go ahead and lift and release this one. And so it's just a quick lift and release very quickly, because you want the speed of that. The speed will look much better in that slow-mo. So yeah, you can get a really great shot and only keep the fish out of the water for 1, 2, 3 seconds at a time.
Yeah, super great tip. Hope people are listening to that, right? So we love pictures for a big fish, but we want to do it in a way that doesn't kill fish. So these are really good tips.
I think for a lot of amateur photographers, they often are using the autofocus.
Yeah.
A lot of times they're lifting, they're trying to find the focus. So if you have that focus locked in already, then you can just lift and let go really fast is another way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, have the shot prepped before you ever bring the fish up out of the water.
Mm-hmm.
Is a good way to think about it. So that the shot you swing the fish up, you take it, you let it go. If we're doing it in the boat, a lot of times we're doing it in the boat, then we'll have the fish down, we swing the net up, person will have their hands wet, lift the fish up and keep the net right under the fish. So if it slips out of their hands, it comes right down into the net. And then you could just swing it right back into the water. So, it's a pretty short process there as well.
Yeah, just real quick, how do you get all those pictures of those jumping fish? Is that just putting time in?
Oh my goodness. So yeah, that's really tough stuff right there.
To
get jumping fish in focus is a challenge for sure. So there's a couple ways you can do it. One, if you have the ability to focus on like Euro nymphing I'm not a Euro nympher at all, but Euro nymphing can work for this because you have the sighter on the line.
Right.
So you can get the focus on it. And in Euro nymphing, it's really common right on the hook set for them to jump right after the hook set. So if you can focus in on that sighter and get the focus range right there, and on the hook set, they'll get up pretty quick. The way I usually do it is we'll fish pocket water. And usually in pocket water, fish tend to jump right up out of the pocket pretty quick. It's not uncommon at all. So I will lock in the focus. I wouldn't say lock it in, but start the focus right there. And usually most of those shots come within like the first 5 seconds after the fish is hooked.
Right.
So the fish will get hooked, it'll turn, it'll jump right up out of the pocket.
Okay. And you're getting some underwater shots, quite a few then. Is this a different camera you're using for that? Okay.
For underwater, I just use a GoPro, actually works really well. And usually what I do is I have it on a pole. It happened to be like a $10 Christmas light pole, for hanging Christmas lights, is what I did.
Yeah.
And just put a GoPro on the end of that. And that allows, to reach out about, up to 10 feet there. So you can get out to where a fish is, and a fish along the pocket will often not spook. So sometimes I can get shots like that, but also you can just kind of follow it. So if fish is running, near you or as it's coming in, to land the fish, you can follow it under the water.
With your pole and the GoPro, like somehow tied to the end of that.
Yep. And then sometimes I'll use a dome, which allows you to shoot above and below at the same time.
Okay.
And that makes for some interesting shots, so you can see the angler, the scenery up above, and then the fish below.
Yeah. Oh, those are beautiful shots. Well, there you go, folks. This is coming from the guy who has 60,000 followers on Instagram and 15 million views a year, just slightly popular. So, Ryan, thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Well, we've got about 10 minutes left here, and I did want to double click on the, kind of the keys to success for Alpine lakes, so what are the best anglers doing when they get up there to really do well on these lakes?
I think really, like in all fly fishing, is take a minute to observe your surroundings. I was up at a few weeks ago at a high mountain lake, and there was some beetles kicking around some of the trees and along the shore. So that's a good place to start. Look in the water. Most all of the lakes around here will have freshwater shrimp, fly fishermen call scuds. And they'll be in varying sizes. They could be as big as a 10. They could be as small as like a 20. So look at that. Look for hatches. There's caddis hatches that happen on some of the lakes. There's also mayflies hatches that happen on a lot of these lakes as well. And then damselflies tend to be real prevalent in the summertime.
Okay.
So keep an eye out for those. Those are usually easy to spot. They're usually bouncing around the shoreline or on lily pads, things of that nature. And so that gives you a really good idea. And then if you have a little bit of background of how those insects move, that can give you an idea, like a damselfly, when they actually kind of shake a little bit as they're swimming through the water, or like a scud has just this kind of a small jump, so your retrieve's going to be real short. Quick ones, things of that nature.
Okay.
Because every lake tends to be a little bit different. So if you can just start by observing, and then sometimes it's just trial and error. I find on these high mountain lakes, they're very eager to just hit something on the surface. So we'll use like just a big fly, something like a chubby Chernobyl, just something large like that. And then I might drop a scud off of there, or a caddis, or even a midge.
I gotcha.
Like a zebra midge in various sizes of color, is a really great one for those lakes.
What are some of your favorite colors and colors and sizes of zebra midges?
I would say black is always good. I use bigger red ones. Tends to work well on the lakes, or even kind of a maroon wine color is another good one.
Okay.
Around here, I would say, that kind of that black wine and then bright red. Usually, when I do a red one, I'll do it with a more of a metallic, like a Flashaboo, on there, so it's quite a bit brighter. That usually does well.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so you think some bright colors do well at altitude then? Yeah,
some of them do. Some days it's just too bright. If you're out in the middle of the day and you might want to dampen those colors, but especially in the evenings, though, when the sun is going down, those brighter colors, I think just help the fish spot them and locate them.
Interesting.
As much as anything, and they'll swim from a little farther distance to come get them.
Yeah, yeah. And where is the food? Can you talk about lakes? Like, where is the food in the lakes? Is it, on the drop-offs and the shoals? Where do you find the best fishing?
I usually am looking for drops, and it just depends. Time of year factors in quite a bit. How cold the water is. Right before ice on, or a lot of times they'll start going a little bit deeper because that surface temp's getting pretty cold. But I find like mornings and evenings, a lot of the fish are cruising the edges, summer, late summer. And those are the fish I like to target the most, are the ones that are in like probably 1 to 4 feet of water.
Right.
That I can sight fish to, and I'll look for those along drop-offs. And if it's a deep drop, like right on the shoreline, they might only be 3 or 4 feet off the shore, which is really fun. You can spot them that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say that really what I'm looking for is drop-offs. So more than anything initially is the first place that I start. And then if I find fish in shallows, maybe I'll look for some flats. Maybe they're out warming up in the sun. because at altitude, every night's a cold night. It could be the middle of the summer and it's probably, 40 degrees at night.
Right. That water can really warm up in those shallow areas too. We were in Colorado this summer and we did some wading, took our boots off and, put some sandals on and waded in. It was kind of nice, it felt good, but like you said, it gets cold at night. So I bet that water cools down a lot.
Yeah. And it does vary quite a bit, more than you would think.
Right. What kind of gear are you taking up there? For instance, are you taking your waders up there? Are you typically, taking some kind of a float tube? What are you doing?
Yeah, I'm usually hiking, and so we'll do a combination. A lot of times I'll put wading sandals in a small backpack, and sometimes I just hike in my sandals. I've been hiking in the Sims. I can't remember the name of it, but it's the Sims wading sandal versus the wading shoe, and I often just take those. I really like those. And I usually don't ever use waders up there. And really rarely will I get out in a float tube anymore. I used to, but I don't these days. And sometimes I'll take my drift boat if it's a lake we can drive to, and we'll just row. They're small enough that you can row your boat around the whole entire lake.
Oh, cool.
So that's an option too. But more often than that, I'm just walking and fishing off the shore and just kind of hunting fish from the shoreline.
You're sight casting then?
Yeah, I if possible, I like sight cast. Yep.
That's fun. Oh, love that. Well, good. And then, just being safe up there in the high country, you have any tips for folks?
Yeah, just kind of common sense. Even if it's summertime, have a jacket, maybe a safety blanket of some kind, plenty of food and water. Throw a bunch of protein bars, granola bars, maybe. Forever, I haven't done it as much recently. I always kept a pocket knife and some tinfoil and some matches because I thought at worst case I could kill a fish.
Right.
And find a place to cook it up if I got stranded.
Yeah.
And that took up very minimal space, to have enough tinfoil to cook fish. We've also cooked fish on rocks. I've done that before too, where I just found a flat rock, put it on, used it as a grill, so to speak.
Kind of Indian style. Yeah. Does your mountain weather change on a dime like it does in so many places out west?
Absolutely. I have been in 60-degree weather in a t-shirt and had it snow an hour later in July.
Right? Oh my gosh.
At that elevation. Yeah. It's not probable, but it certainly could.
Yeah. Gosh, we were in Montana years ago and we were up in the Beartooth Range and it snowed about 1,000 feet above us, and we got out of our, climbed out of our tents in the morning. And you could just see the band of snow about 1,000 feet high in all the mountains, and hikers were just stumbling out of the mountains all morning long, complaining about it was mid-August, right? And they got like 6 inches of snow up there, and like none of them were prepared for it. Not that we were per se, but we, I always bring, winter clothing, warm clothes because it can change.
Yeah, and I always take warm clothes that will stay warm when wet. I think is important that maybe some people don't think about is make sure, whatever warm stuff you have, plan on it getting wet in case a storm rolls through. In the Uinta Mountains here where we're talking, here around Flaming Gorge, thunderstorms come through nearly every day in the summertime.
Okay.
So you maybe a light rain jacket or something at least, and then be prepared to just wait out some thunder and lightning at times. Just
right.
That's just kind of part of the game.
So what do you do when you're at altitude and the trees are 4 feet tall and all of a sudden one of these thunderstorms rolls in? Are you heading downhill as fast as you can, or are you just, hunker down somewhere?
Yeah, not usually. Usually I just, when I show up to an area, I kind of glance around and look for the lowest spot in the area.
Mm-hmm.
Is typically what I do. And then if the storm comes through, we just kind of put the rods down, maybe even get away from the rods, maybe set it somewhere and walk away from your rod. And there's been a few places where I've just laid on the ground and usually I get under a smaller tree so there's some protection from the rain coming down, because you're going to be one of thousands of trees right there.
Yeah.
Thousands and thousands usually in that area.
Lightning makes me nervous. That's the one thing, and it seems like almost every time I've done an alpine lake, some weather has moved in and you're trying to figure out, just like you said, where's a low spot or, someplace I can hunker down. So great tips there, Ryan. Let me ask you just back to the movie for a second. So you were very reluctant to make the movie the way that they describe, but it's a beautiful piece. It really is. And I'm kind of curious, what are you hoping people are going to take away from that movie?
Oh, kind of what you refer to, I guess, about it being a silver lining. Trying to make the best out of a bad situation. I think is what I really was hoping people could have some sort of inspiration that when life doesn't go your way, there's creative opportunities to make something out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been inspired by lots of different artists and things. I can't remember his name, but there's an artist who developed a condition where he shakes all the time, and he started a type of art where he called it "Embrace the Shake."
Really?
And so all his art is based on, and I really wish I could remember this because I didn't think about it beforehand until you just said this, but yeah, he's made these amazing art pieces, and if he never had that shake, he never would have done that type of art. And 100% probably truth, I never would have made that film or even have this Instagram if it wasn't for this. And I hope people have enjoyed it. It seems like, a lot of people are so kind and have reached out to me about the film or about my Instagram, how much they enjoy it, how, keep them coming is a really common phrase on there. We sure enjoy it. And so, yeah, I hope it inspires people just mostly to get out and enjoy nature is my number one goal when I'm making that Instagram. Even at this point, I do get paid for it. But I've still not gone away from the roots of let's just try to inspire people to get out there. So I rarely promote, brands or anything like that on that Instagram because of that. My promotion is get outside.
Get out there.
I just think the world's a better place if people get out and understand how nature works and how it benefits their mental health. Even if you don't have a mental illness or something like that, it still benefits your mental health in general.
100%. I feel like you're either going into something or you're coming out of something. It's very rarely that everything is just perfect in anybody's life, and what you make of it, I feel like you found your calling through this sickness, and maybe you're even building a legacy here. I'd say you are.
So I don't know. I don't really think about any of that, to be honest. I just kind of think about that day. I kind of live in the moment that way.
Yeah.
Because that's how it is with the disease. I don't know what I'm going to wake up to the next day, in terms of pain or in terms of how I'm feeling, what my body's doing. And so you just take each day one day at a time. And I just try to spend as much time with my wife and kids, to be honest, and try to take them along the way as much as possible and savor each moment. Try to be present in whatever's going on in their life as well.
What a great attitude. So is it possible how can we watch the movie Escape? How do we see that?
So right now it's still a part of the Fly Fishing Film Tour for another 2 months here, I think. I think it goes through the end of the year. I think it's winding down in terms of locations. I think most of the locations that are going to show it have shown it. And then after the first of the year, then it will possibly go public. So I don't have a good answer for you.
Okay.
At this point, I'm not sure how we're going to use it going forward. If you do follow my Instagram, I will make an announcement on there, probably more than one, saying that it's available for sure.
Okay. All right. And that's the Green River Fly Fisher on Instagram, folks. Well, how can people get in touch with you? Maybe DM you through Instagram? Are you booking trips anymore?
So, yeah, if anyone wants to get in touch with me, DMs on Instagram is probably the best way to do it. Booking trips with me is pretty hard. I don't accept new clients April through November. So if someone wants to do a winter trip, I can usually fit that in. But I'm always happy to refer guides in the area. The Green is one of the most famous rivers, in the world, and Flaming Gorge is an amazing fishery as well. And we have guides that do high country stuff in the area as well.
Nice.
So I'm always happy to connect people to those individuals. Anything that helps my community, honestly, I'm really happy to try to help that way.
I get you.
And have local businesses be successful.
Right. Can you tick off some of the fly shops there in town that you might recommend?
So yeah, Flaming Gorge Resort and Trout Creek Flies are kind of the two main fly shops. Western Rivers Fly Fisher it's kind of a small shop. I think seems like mostly just for their clients, their guide clients, can grab some leaders and some weights or something of that nature, a hat or a t-shirt. And there's another one, Touchdown Resort, that's kind of similar to that. That's more limited, but yeah, Trout Creek Flies and Flaming Gorge Resort are the two big fly shops.
Okay.
there. And they have a lot of amazing flies by local tyers. Patterns that were designed here on the river for the river.
Right.
Which is really cool. There's a lot of guides here that are great tyers that have been featured in some of the major fly tying. Montana Fly Company, Umpqua, those type of companies.
Yeah, right.
A lot of flies here that
signature.
Yep, that are very specific.
And can you tick off are there some restaurants in town? It's a small little town, but I imagine in the summer it's probably got a lot of anglers wandering around there in the evening looking for a place to eat.
There are a lot of anglers. There's a lot of kayakers and paddle boarders here too. And then a lot of boaters in general for the big lake. Some of my favorites, like Flaming Gorge Resort, does a really great job at their restaurant. It is popular, so if you're here in the summer, you're going to have to wait. Usually like an hour to get in.
Oh, wow.
Just as a heads up. And they do their best. They try really hard to keep moving people through. Another really cool place is called The Snag, located at Cedar Springs Marina. It's a floating restaurant and a bar and grill. It's only open on the weekends, so it's like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's a really kind of cool place. Really cool. It's like an island atmosphere. Kind of feel like you're in the Bahamas. And when the big, Flaming Gorge is big, so you have some pretty big boats that come by. We'll send some waves, and the whole, restaurant kind of moves with the wave. It's kind of weird at first, but it's really cool. And they do live music, and they have like cornhole going on there in the restaurant. So it's kind of a cool vibe. A lot of guys, will just go get a beer and have some barbecue or something like that. I like their fish taco.
Oh, do you? Okay.
And then another one on the other side, a little bit far from right here in Deschamps, but if you're coming in from the Salt Lake side, it's called Browning's in the town of Manila. And they're kind of an old town mom and pop, burger and shake kind of place. Really great food though. Really enjoy their food there.
Okay. Well, those are some great options. Thanks for sharing. And Ryan, thanks for being on the show. Great job.
Yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it. And thanks for letting me share a little bit about our area.
You bet. So wish you extraordinary success, Ryan, and everything that you're doing. And folks, thank you for listening. And you can always DM me or email me with comments and suggestions at sag50@gmail.com. And hey, if you like the show, tag a buddy and give us a share, like, a follow if you could. As always, our music is by our Brothers Fountain, and hope you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again soon. Tight lines, everybody.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.